Interviews are an integral part of the hiring process. Did you know they've evolved over the years? Can you believe there was a time that the pre screen was the actual interview? In this episode of Tip That Skill, we're talking about interviews. Yes, we're helping you prepare for your next one. We're also giving you some insight into what recruiters look for when interviewing and how they prepare. Welcome to Tip That Scale.
So if you talk about the interview process and questions and things like that, I think you have to look at from the beginning of where, what the recruiters or those initial interviewers are told. Hey, here's what you should accomplish or how you should go about that interview, right? Obviously, you're told to greet the applicant, kind of make them feel hopefully relaxed and this is a good experience. You want them to walk away from this, if nothing else, to have had it as a good experience and the person was nice, informative, and it just wasn't a fit. You would hope that would be a major goal set out on the front end, and that it would carry through with recruiters. They should briefly explain, here's the process we're about to go through, here's the position you're interviewing for, here's who I am, just a brief on me, and let them know what the expectations are. This is going to be a 30-minute interview. We're going to kind of cover these areas. You feel free to ask questions along the way. I know some recruiters have them wait till the end. And here's an anticipated timeline that I should be able to get some type of response back to you. Those are the things that should be set out on the front end and followed through, hopefully. And then the goal of the interviewee, the person being interviewed, should be to be memorable, be sticky, right? Stay in that person's mind after they get off of the phone with you, because we know they're going to talk to a lot more. You got to make the most of your 30 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you got. And often that is by being personable and relating yourself to it. So I think that's the front end of any kind of interview before we ever get started about questions, types of interviewing skills, goals of the interviews in terms of the areas to cover and all that. So
what really is the goal of the pre-screen?
To me, it's a filter, right? That's your first chance, especially now. There's so many coming through. It is the filter to narrow that grouping down to as closely as you understand, match what the hiring manager said that they want. And you want to gain the information that you can take back to them that says, this is why I'm choosing this person for you to review. So yeah, that goal absolutely should be to take the things, and it's not just using, and it definitely won't just be using what the manager told. You're also evaluating a lot of other things, the personality fit with the group, the team, the company, person's attitude and background and monies and all those things. There's a lot of different filters that are pushed through in that piece. But yes, the absolute initial is to bring, that's the whole purpose of, well, not the whole purpose of recruiting, but a big piece of recruiting is filtering down. And in this environment, even more so.
So no, go ahead, AJ.
So again, let's just go back to the identification of the first pre-screen or even the first interview. How are you identifying the candidate? And when I go back and saying, okay, there's a skill that's been lost over the years, and I go back to Boolean and the reason why it's so strong. You can throw in Boolean strings and things like that into an ATS to kind of funnel in the right candidates. And so let's just say you've got overloaded with 1,000 resumes that are coming into the interview process. Even statistically, even if there's 1,000 people, maybe 10% of those are qualified. Now you got to whittle that down into that 10%. And you can't do that unless you know how to put in you'd have to throw in a Boolean string. I mean, Ron, what we were using Greenhouse, right? You could throw in a Boolean string and it would whittle down the candidates you want. Now, are you properly trained in Boolean? Again, let's reflect back on what we are doing as internal TA members. If not, then okay, well, understand what those key specific things that your team is looking for and then move into that. And then asking, when you go into the interview process, the proper questions that you're asking, what exactly are you trying to get out of it, right? some of the best interviews, like Ron was talking about, is saying this is what the role is, this is what the responsibilities are. So at least the candidate knows what to talk about or speak of versus just having an open-ended conversation and then disqualifying themselves because you didn't hit a specific topic that the recruiter or TA person was looking for.
Yep.
And that's happening a lot right now. Because, well, hey, blah, blah, blah. They don't even get into it. They just start talking about, what'd you do at this role? What'd you do at this role? What'd you do at this role? Help me understand what you're looking for.
100%. And I think part of that comes from how you engage as a candidate, right? If you see that that's going down the path of just, like you said, somebody just checking the boxes and okay, you worked here, blah, tell me what you did. As a candidate, you should stop it right there and say, hey, give me an idea of what they're looking for in this thing so I can relate to you directly what I've done in that space. I've done a lot in that at that job, but let me be able to target better for you. And hopefully, and again, that's another opportunity to be sticky with somebody. You want every opportunity to create dialogue and conversation that you can get out of this interview. If it's one of those check the boxes, you just get lost in the stack of the other 1,000 people. So, when you answer a question, wrap it up with a dialogue prompting finish. Ask them something back that's going to get them to talk. Again, another opportunity to be sticky.
Mm-hmm. I think this entire process, it's pushed individuals away from being a consultant, just being extremely transactional because they just have to get through a certain number of things before the end of the day and clear out this.
I mean, that's another piece too, right? Before you go into that interview with that recruiter or hiring manager, or what have you, be aware of their background. Who are they? What are they?
Mm-hmm.
Try something to where you can just connect. And again, sticky is for me is the key there. You also have to have an audience awareness, right? If you're talking, and I know so many times I get on the phone with a candidate and they would do that, right? They would just vomit all over you the information that you're not looking for. I don't care. That's where audience awareness has to be there of, I'm losing this person. And you can do that with simple checkpoints. Am I answering your question? Or are you looking for me to go another path? Or did that answer your question? I can provide more, but that does, it shows audience awareness, and so many companies are looking for that. And again, a chance to be sticky, not just somebody throwing up all over you.
I know.
I mean, I like to use, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, I know on the standpoint or the position as a candidate, as well as on the side of the hiring manager or supportive interviewer for a particular role or place, I like to rely on what I learned in a sales role. Is you're going to gauge who you're talking to and determine if they're a driver, meaning let's get to the point, let's get there. If they're amiable, where they're more relaxed, they like to have more of a conversation. If they're expressive, like, all the big, everything is big. And then those who are analytical, you find out where they are in those 4 particular personas. And then you really start to talk about things from that perspective. So you have that in common. It's being true because you want to leverage how they take in information. That's a lot of going that direction and looking at it from that perspective. What were you going to say, AJ?
Well, I was going to say that now this 100% is an employer's market, right? Not the employee market. But as potential employees, we should try to take control of the process, kind of like what Ron was saying, right? Like if you see it going down a path that you're completely unsure about what exactly they're looking for, step back and just say, hey, what are you looking for?
Mm-hmm.
I've done a lot. It may not all be in my resume because I can't fit it all in there or even in this conversation, but what are the key responsibilities and key needs of this role? What are you trying to accomplish by trying to hire for this role? Not just have a pair of boots that are hitting the ground and just going, but it's going to give you a clear-cut idea of just how well the person you're speaking to actually understands the role and what is going to get required to do it, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, that's leading up into the interview process.
I think what's really interesting is gauging the interviewer style.
Mm-hmm.
I know What would you say that your interview style is? I'm gonna go to Ron. He has this look like, let me think about this. I know he's been thinking about it already.
I definitely like the open-ended, conversational, spurring type interviews. I don't go scripted on mine. I know what the job requirement is before I go into it. I know what the candidate's background is before I go into it, and then I like to just get them talking. And if I can do that, yeah, I can steer them in and out of paths if they're drifting from where I want to go. And I do this stuff on the front end, right? Letting them know what we're going to do and what we're trying to get to. And I do. I want, my goal is for them to walk away from there knowing, hey, I was a good fit for this. I wasn't a good fit for that. And I can accept whatever that is, or at the very least, it was a really good experience, because you never know when that's going to come back around that person's a fit for something else. So yeah, I like to get the conversation going, because I can get so much more out of getting them talking and listening than you have. I mean, there's different types of interviews, right? And you employ a lot of those different ones within an interview with your closed-ended, open-ended, behavioral, opinion questions, hypothetical type questions. You can bounce in and out with a lot of those different types within there. But yeah, for me, it's absolutely open-ended. Let's get the conversation going, and I steer where I need to and sit back and listen.
What about you, AJ? What's your style?
Mine's pretty similar. I mean, Ron was one of my mentors, so I picked up a couple of things from but I take a very constant approach. Kind of like what he was saying is like I let the individual know what I'm looking for in this particular role, what the organization needs, and how can their experience fit within that. So I'm asking pinpointed questions and trying to understand how that person's skill set is going to be a good fit for the role. And if it's not, I let them know. The entire you're basically trying to start a relationship with someone. And so when you're trying to do that, the most successful relationships are the ones that have that open-ended line of communication that's going across, throughout the whole thing. Hey, I like this. Hey, I don't like this. Don't do this. I mean, even when you're talking to your significant other, you don't just leave it up to ambiguity, because then the other person really doesn't know what you're looking for or what you need. Very similar, same type of situation. Like I've always told my teams, like when you're trying to approach someone, you don't just run up and be like blah 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 blah. Blah. No, you try to understand the person and see if they're.
You don't? Oh my gosh!
No, I don't.
Now you know.
Huh?
Yeah. You try to see exactly if you're going to be a proper match for each other. You can't do that by firing squad questions like bam, 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 bam. Like we're not speed dating, that kind of thing. I take a very consultative approach. I try to understand the person's needs. I try to understand the organization's need, how well they mesh well together. And if they don't align, I let the person know during that conversation, so they're not left feeling like, oh, I did great, and then you get a rejection email like 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just me though.
What about mine is conversational as well, if y'all guess that. I just feel that you learn so much in a conversation, especially for certain roles. If you are in customer success, customer service, a conversational interview style is ideal because you want to see how they talk to people. Are they flustered immediately? I would say the one that can be bothersome is behavioral. And the reason I have an issue with that type of interview style, if the hiring manager or the recruiter is only asking questions about behavior, because we know we all come from different experiences, and I've seen too many people with that behavioral interview style automatically dismiss someone because they wouldn't do it the way they would. That tells me a lot about the recruiter or the hiring manager, but that's the one I find the most problematic.
Which is the one that a lot of companies are going to utilizing the most now. So,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, and it does because of that. And I 100% understand and agree with what you're saying. You as a candidate have to be even better at taking those and answering those and looking at them. But again, that goes back to the front end of understanding what are they looking for in this role, so that I can tailor my responses more to that. if in fact that is what I want to do and can do that way. But yeah, you're right. People are usually looking for especially at that interview level, very specific things. And if it doesn't fit directly in that box, then it's over, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And it can be unnerving from a personality standpoint. It can be unnerving for certain people because they could easily say, oh, I'm not extroverted. If you're talking to a hiring manager, like, how would you handle this type of situation? And an introvert, if we talk about introvert, extroverts, and ambiverts, they may approach it differently depending on the situation. And trying to read the room is always going to be a challenge, or you're at the point of always wondering, am I answering this correctly? We're
yeah.
in a conversational, you're just having a conversation. But otherwise, what is it that they want to know? What's the right answer? Tell me what you want to know and I'll tell you.
And so many times the right answer is situational, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of
Absolutely.
times with the behavioral stuff, it doesn't allow for those situational responses. It's very black and white response, and you guess which path or direction they wanted to take. We all know that we have given responses that are natural to us, but it doesn't mean that's always the path that we take, because we evaluate what is the situation, what's needed, what's best for the group as a whole versus my individual self. So those change your responses.
And some of those hiring managers, they don't want to hear, well, it depends.
Right.
They don't want to hear it. It's like, but it does. Guess what? It does depend. I saw,
When you talk about what the hiring managers want, and it's always so refreshing. I know where we've all just recently come from, there were some hiring managers there that were just really a joy to work with, and take from them and interview the requirements on the front end, because often those that you really get excited about putting people in their group are the ones who, like, I'm looking for people not that don't match everything I already have in here. I want something different, somebody to bring new experiences and flavor and ideas and thoughts. I'm not looking for people who think exactly like I do. I want, somebody that thinks in a different way, because it only makes us better as a team. So when you get those types of managers looking for things, and then those are actually fun interviewing and hiring processes when you get one like that. Now you do have some of the opposite way, right? This is the way we are. If they don't fit in this mold, don't want them. Very already in their mind, they know what that response should be, versus listening to what the person said and why they did it, and then saying, hey, you know what, that is another way. That is another good idea, way to do it. So but you have to ask yourself, do I want to work with people that are like one way or the other, if you don't fit that type of profile?
have y'all ever had a video interview? There are some of the larger health insurance companies use video interviews where they set up a time, they'll send you the link, and they give you a little bit of information beforehand. There's a video, welcome, and this process. And then all of a sudden, it feels like you're on a timer where there's a question and they give you, let's say, 30 to a minute to think about it. And then they give you a time frame for you to answer that question. So you aren't engaging with anyone. Y'all have never had that? Have never gone through that?
Nope.
Whew.
No, I mean, I know what you're talking about, because I kind of had one maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. There was something like that. There was a company here in Dallas that honestly looked pretty awesome, but then it got to the interview thing, and then it threw me off, because it was just like, oh, you got 5 minutes after the application to like record this pre-recorded video that you got to sit down. I was like, I'm not even ready for that. I'm in my PJs, man. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's about preparing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to me, that's saying my time's worth way more than yours, right? Let me that you spend your time in doing those types of things, and then let me decide, do I want to waste mine on you? It's kind of different.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
I've gone through it twice. Once was in 2021 for
Mhm.
university. The other one was maybe in 2018 or 2019 healthcare company. But yeah, it's very
Impersonal?
disconcerting. And it's very impersonal. They try to make it personal with the video, and you see different people talking about their experience at the company. And this is all before remote work. So it was all video based, and this is what it's like to be here, and this is what we look for. Then all of a sudden, that's introduction to this process. And then you have to record your answers to a particular question.
Mm.
So it's almost very robotic. And
Mm.
if you're very big and lively and outgoing, you have no one to read. And that's a big portion of the interview process. As a candidate, you want to read your interviewers, whether it's the recruiter, whether it's the hiring manager, whether you're talking to the CEO or someone you're going to be on the front line with. You want to be able to read their energy. You want to be able to engage their responses as well. You know, how you can course correct and adjust. So that's where the recorded video is extremely challenging and problematic. And I don't know if they do that because of the size of the organization. The university wasn't that big, but I wonder if they're thinking about it as a part of their pre-screening process, but also are they getting that many resumes? And again, what are you looking for? I would say this for any candidate going through an interview, something to think about. When you're asked a question,
Mm.
is that the answer that they really want? Or is there something more that the interviewer they want from the candidate? That's something to consider as well.
That's weird.
The other thing I've seen people talk about it on LinkedIn, they're applying to all these positions and then they may get, let's say out of 100 submissions, they may get 3 interviews. I saw one of these posts yesterday and I was annoyed by one of the comments that came from it. This person posted that they've submitted 300 applications in let's say 3 months, and they've had 5 interviews. And someone commented and said, well, are you really applying to the right positions for you to only get 5 interviews? I was so mad because the person who commented that, it lets me know they have not gone through the process. That was right up front and center to me because they're dismissing this person to say, oh, that lets me know that you're not applying to the right jobs. That person probably is applying to the right jobs. The person who commented doesn't understand that there's a whole lot more going on in the market that they aren't getting interviews. So that's an issue. I've had some of my coaching clients go through multiple interviews, and which we know is normal. I remember back in the day, a long time ago, you submitted your resume, you were called in for an interview directly with the hiring manager, and they said yes or no, and boom, Bob's your uncle. You're on your way. These days, everybody says they're looking for the right fit for the organization, but sometimes I even think the organizations don't really know what their personality is and what the right fit means.
With the current situation that we're going through, I mean, I guess I get it. There's going to be problems, and companies are still trying to catch up, or they're trying to find somebody that can help them catch up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But just let us know what that is,
right.
please. That's all I'm asking. Just like you want your candidates to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
you be honest with them.
Ooh, can you repeat that?
If you want your candidates to be honest with them.
Say it one more time for the people in the back.
Be honest to your damn candidates.
From an employer brand standpoint, that person not being honest, no matter what department they're in, it will hurt your employer brand and your overall corporate brand.
We can see the breaks in the processes and how we would go about solving for them and a lot of those different things. But it's like, is that what the organization wants? Right?
Is it what they need?
I would say yes. With what we've seen so far, yeah, 100%. No, I mean, granted, there's a lot of people out there in the market right now, and I completely understand that it's going to take time to kind of go through all of those interviews and all those resumes and things like that. But there is definitely a better way of going about doing this. I would say that this needs to go two pronged. Like, yes, organizations need to change their processes, and for a lot of people out there, not being able to work and providing an income is a very detrimental part of our society right now. But be patient. You're gonna end up just where you want to end up or where you need to be at that particular time. Just be resilient.
Ryan, what's your thought? What are your thoughts?
I mean, my thoughts are that I don't know if they're really thoughts or hopes. I hope that through this process that we really do see an evolution of this hiring process. There's so
Mhm.
many bad pieces of it that, and maybe some of the people that have control of changing it are going through it right now to really see it from the other side, and we'll be able to somehow collectively come up with a better way to do it. It is absolutely broken right now.
One of the things I would love to see, besides a revamp of the number one, qualifications or responsibility of the role in the job posting and job description, that's one.
Mhm.
The overall application process, meaning do you really want a resume, or do you really want us to go through everything and putting it in the applicant tracking system? So which one? The other thing I would love to see is not just from the applicant tracking system, but the responses, all the canned responses. Companies need to go back in and look at that and be honest. If you didn't look at my resume, tell me you didn't look at my resume. It's okay. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Yes, I'm still going to have an idea about you as a company from an employer brand standpoint. If you tell me you didn't look at my resume, I can deal with that better than saying that you did when I know you really didn't, because I know you didn't. The other thing that I would love to see, and this is high on my list, I would love to see more training and guidance, and not necessarily from that internal recruiting team, but externally for anyone who is interviewing candidates, whether it's that recruiting team, that talent acquisition team, but also hiring managers of all levels, even to the tippy top, because we know that there's just not one way to interview, but we need to see how hiring managers are interviewing.
Mhm.
That needs to be understood, because from a branding standpoint, it affects your employer brand. And if they aren't laying it out ahead of time, these are the questions, this is what we're looking for. We always say there's a misstep in the process. Part of that misstep is the fact that some of these hiring managers, some of these recruiters aren't interviewing in a way that makes sense for what they're interviewing for.
I've been through two of those, so I get it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like when I was with a recruitment marketing agency many years ago, they would go through looking at the recruiting process. What they would do is take someone who already works for the company, either in human resources or one of the top level executive, take their resume and send it back through the process, send it through the hiring process to see if they were automatically being weeded out of the process. And I would say probably about 75% of the time they were. They would change the names, to protect the innocent. They would change the names, keep all of the experience the same, and then send it through the process. And either on the recruiting side, they would automatically dismiss the person who was already working there, or a hiring manager would say, yeah, this is not, based on the skills that they have listed here, it's not what we need. It was eye-opening that they didn't really understand their own internal processes and what they were looking for and what they were weeding out. needs to go through and have refreshers, but I think that's a big portion of it. People either say they don't have time, but this is something that you need to make time for. Any other thoughts about the interview process?
A lot of the areas that an interviewer will try to get at and try to gain information, especially with open-ended questions. Some of the main areas you're going to see are that fall under like leadership, analytical, strategic thinking, integrity, flexibility, your planning and organizational skills, like resolution, your communication skills, relationship management. Those are areas that you can tell, or hopefully tell, by reading the job description that are important, not just the can piece of it, but the part that is the really extras they'd like to see. Those are the ones you should prepare yourself on the front end to be asked those types of questions for, and have some thoughts in your mind. I mean, and that's sometimes the bad part of the open-ended questions is you got a good answer, but you got hit with that question and you weren't prepared for it and you just couldn't think of it right then, right? A lot of times you think of, oh, I should have said this when I got on there. I had a good example, but in the moment, sometimes those catch people. So I think that's why it's key to understand thoroughly what that job description is and the pieces they're looking for, and practice yourself on the front end of creating some open-ended questions that you would ask someone if you're going to cover those. And then you being in turn able to ask those. The mindset that an interviewer needs to take going into it is, let me think about what types of questions I would ask a person around this position, and then create my own answers and responses. It gets you in that thinking mode, and it drags up some things from the past that you can be more readily responsive with than getting off the phone and saying, oh, I wish I would have said this. And sometimes if you do have one of those that comes up, turn around and email it to that person. Hey, you asked me this question. I thought of something else I did, right? And it's another chance to be sticky, but hopefully it would have been a really good response if you felt like it was worth sending.
And you can always include that in your thank you follow-up. One of the questions I like to ask, and y'all know I love talking about values, is what are your values and how do you live those in your role and with your team? What it tells me about someone that I'm interviewing is, number one, they know who they are. They know what's important to them, and then they know how to work with a team to either put those values in place and support of others, or how they use it in bringing people along and even lifting people up, especially from a leader standpoint.
One of the questions that I love asking, not during just the interview process, but like even amongst team, is what do you want to be known for?
Mm-hmm.
Because your actions directly imply what that is. Why are you doing what you're doing?
What's your why? What's your why?
Yeah. Help me understand that. And does that fit within my organization? Right? I think that's a key thing that needs to be asked during these interview processes. Like, what is a person wanting to be known for? And then hold them accountable for it. My 3 rules are, have fun, don't lie, and literally just work towards your why.
Mm-hmm.
I think most of the time it's just hearsay, but when you present somebody with that, I think it gets them thinking.
Yeah. What about after the interview? Ron, you mentioned this, and I believe this is an opportunity that a lot of people don't take enough advantage of, not just in the thank you and the follow-up. I wonder how many people after the interview make note of the questions that were asked, and also how did you answer them as a candidate, and if there is something else that you may have missed, because more than likely you'll get that question again in another interview. What would you say something after the interview?
And just to add on to your point, I think it's good to have those, because those are really good for coming back with a follow-on conversation, referencing your past conversations, right? When someone is able to reference your past conversation, it shows you they were paying attention, they were prepared, they were thinking, they didn't just answer the question, move on, and leave that interview. So, and it gives you a chance again to be sticky and reconnect with whether it be that same person again, because you're probably going to interact with them again at some point, or the one in front of that interview in front of that one, right? You can reference, when I spoke with so-and-so, we talked about this, right? And it shows them that you're organized, you kept up with the conversations, and you weren't just going through the interview for the sake of the interview. So I think that's huge. We talked about always after interviews, if not, you hadn't done it before, go on and connect on LinkedIn with the person, do a follow-up, right? I mean, you don't necessarily, and that's a timing feel piece. I mean, you're not going to follow up with them the next day because probably nothing happened, and then you killed yourself of becoming a nuisance. But give it 5 days, maybe a week, and then follow up with them. Just, hey, still thinking about any updates you've had, just something again to be sticky, because sometimes recruiters, especially now when they've got so many on their plate, they may be looking, hey, who is going to follow up? Who does really want this? Who's going to show the extra initiative? Or I went through 10 that day and, I forgot about one of them. There's where your chance is to send them that note and reference, hey, when you and I talked, something funny, something personal. If you did a good job of being personal there in that interview, you bring it back up in that note that reminds them of who you are. I think those are, you talked about the follow-up email afterwards, or the thank you note. Those follow-up responses there are even way more important than they have been in a long time, just because of the way the current environment and situation is. There's so much out there. You got to help somebody remember you and remind them of you. Not because you were forgettable, but there were so many others in the mix and things that have happened to them since then. I definitely liked having one of them prompt me, and I would tell them, hit me up. Here's a time frame. Hit me in 5 days. Hit me in 7 days. Don't let me free. If I felt that there was a good option with this person and I needed to get some movement for them.
No, you're an anomaly. A lot of people don't do that, unfortunately. Going back to that follow-up, and if you're the first person who is interviewed, I mean, you don't know if you are, but you always have to come to it like you are.
We talked about open-ended type questions. So in preparing for those, just remember that the lead-ins to those. I mean, when you want to create or prepare yourself for them, just think about, those are the ones that are like the tell me about, the describe how, the when you did this, help me understand, right? And that's how a lot of those are opened up. And then you can follow on with that. And it just helps you think about better ways to answer questions or bring your experiences to the forefront.
Reach out. If you really want the role, reach out to the person and stay in touch with them. Give them the opportunity to be honest with you. Just try to understand the role, try to understand the organization, understand yourself, and see if that's the right type of opportunity. And if it is, chase it. Like, really go after it. Don't let it wait or sit back thinking, oh, I've got this in the bag, because if anything we've learned, that's not the case in this industry right now. Chase it. Do everything in your power to try to get in front of it. Now, if you did all of those things and you still weren't selected, well, that's fine. But at least you gave it your all.
The key word from this episode, and the biggest takeaway, is to be sticky. I've never heard that word used in relation to interviews, but it makes sense. You want to make sure you're memorable. Speaking of remembering, remember to rate, tip that scale, and like and follow wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.